my thoughts are those commandments, like those things that God told us in the Bible to do, he really meant like for us to actually do them. Not just go to church on a Sunday and pray about doing them or pray about other people doing them or pray for missionaries, but like go, therefore. Like not maybe go, or if you can go, it's just go, do, go therefore and make disciples. That's our job, and it's something that requires action, that's different than just showing up on a Sunday morning in a cute outfit.
Jenny Clark was a single mother of 2 when she answered God's call to not only begin adopting and fostering children, but specifically children with Down syndrome and other life-threatening, incurable, even terminal medical conditions. You're about to get a front row seat to one of the most powerful stories of obedience to God you've ever heard. Welcome to A Stronger Faith, a podcast for those who question, wonder, and seek to understand. I'm your host, Stacy McCants, and we pray that God uses this conversation to move you in your pursuit of a stronger faith. We continue to receive messages on how the stories in this podcast are impacting the lives of our listeners, and we are thrilled to hear it. It's what we pray for every day. If you'd like to help the podcast reach even more people, please rate us on your favorite player and share it with anyone you think might benefit. Ratings are a big deal for the success of any podcast, and we're asking for yours. Today's episode is a story of a woman who has literally given her life to follow God. So without further commentary, meet Jenny Clark. Jenny Clark, thank you for taking some time to share the story of what's been probably a pretty unique life that you've led for the last 20 years?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Somewhere in there. You've got 2 biological children here. You have 2 adopted children here, both with Down syndrome.
Correct.
You have fostered how many kids?
I think it's 15, 14, 15, 13, somewhere in that range. I should have done an actual head count, but sometimes they get lost because some of them are only there for, a weekend or whatever, but around 15.
Well, I had a friend of mine, it's a mutual friend, that said, hey, so their family has adopted a lot. He said, sounds great, but you gotta talk to Jenny Clark. He's like, she's something else. And so he connected us, and you have invited me to come to your home. We're sitting at your kitchen table, and the kids are doing their thing, and I am thankful that you have taken the time to sit with me and talk through some of these things, and the kids for being so good. So
at the moment,
we may get some background noise, and that's going to be fine because that's how life works in the Clark household. So,
yes, it is.
So you had 2 biological kids, and right around the second, you got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the fostering and the adoption all happened after you became a single mom.
That's correct.
So I don't even know what questions to ask around that, because...
Why are you so crazy?
Well,
what was going on in your brain? What made you think this was a good idea?
Well, something happened, because I would think the natural thing would be, well, I'm a single mom now instead of a 2-parent family where one can take one or part of these responsibilities and the other. So all of it's on you.
Mm-hmm.
I would think it would be less than an ideal circumstance to then say, all right, now we're going to adopt.
Yeah.
And we're not only going to adopt, we're specifically going to look for special needs.
Mm-hmm.
Holy moly. Tell me about what happened in you that would say, this is the decision that we need to make here.
So, I went through my divorce when I was actually pregnant with our second child. And I remember the moment. I mean, I can remember it. I can see it as if I was standing there right now. I was standing in my kitchen, 7 months pregnant, I think, coming up on Thanksgiving, Christmas, favorite time of the year, and realized, okay, this is it. Like, this is not, I'm going down this avenue towards divorce. Like, starting now, that's where we're going. And I was devastated. I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't devastated because, I grew up in a very legalistic church and divorce was bad. Like we looked at people who were divorced and thought just because of that, regardless of the circumstances, you're probably in trouble as far as your eternity goes,
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big thing. So I never expected to get divorced. I mean, I don't think anybody goes into a marriage expecting to get divorced, but I really never expected that, I thought I planned it out, the husband, the house, the picket fence, the 2 kids and a dog. And that all came crashing down, in that moment in my kitchen, 7 months pregnant. And I just remember God speaking to my heart. Like, it wasn't an audible thing, but I just knew, in that moment I could feel him saying to me, this wife thing may not have worked out, but you're still a mom. And that's what I made you to be. And you're still able to do that job. Like, that part is not falling apart. You've got this toddler, you've got another kid on the way. This is what I created you to do. And that's going to continue. And I just knew right then that I would adopt someday. Honestly, I thought from the beginning up until I went to Africa, that it would be, a cute little brown baby from Africa that needed me so badly. And God had a different plan.
Well, from what I've heard of divorce, it can be brutal. I guess I can't imagine what it would have been like to have been about to have a baby in your last trimester. There's lots of other things going on that make your world different when you're in your last trimester of pregnancy, and then after you've given birth.
Showing up at a lawyer's office pregnant, a divorce lawyer.
Yeah.
Showing up to deliver your child and having to explain, so look, my soon-to-be ex-husband is going to be here. We're in the middle of a divorce, but I'm giving birth today, so it's going to be weird, Oh, yeah.
That's a difficult thing for anyone.
And my friends literally asked me, like, how are you, like, how are you standing and moving about and, making words that make sense? And literally, I think at some point, and I'm not exactly sure when it was, after I realized, okay, this is, the divorce is happening, I just said, God, I can't. Like, I physically, mentally, in all the ways, I can't do this. And it was like he literally had me by the waist, like walking me around, causing me to seem like a sane person, and doing day-to-day things and managing to go through the divorce and give birth and have a newborn and sell the house and finalize the divorce and all those things. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, this idea, I think it's a garbage idea that God doesn't give you any more than you can handle.
Oh.
You are clearly a strong person. I don't think anybody's handling that alone in a way that would cause them not only to get through that, but then to not too terribly long after make a decision like, I'm going to begin to adopt on top of all of this.
I can tell you with 100% certainty, God will absolutely give you more than you can handle. Not more than you can handle with him, which sounds cute. It's a cute little, he'll never give you more than you can handle without him. But the catch to that is you have to allow him to do it, and I think people just think it's a cute, adorable little catchphrase that you can put on a, top of a calendar or whatever. But, it's not that he gives you what you can handle with him. It's that he gives you more than you can handle, and you have to decide to rely on him if you're going to get through it. Like, it's not so much that it's just a magical, he'll automatically be there and help you through it, because to me, that's the same as he'll never give you more than you can handle.
Right.
Because you're still doing it on your own. You're in this terrible place and I have a plan for it. You can't see that plan. You're going to have to trust me. And if you trust me and really turn over control of the situation to me, then I will get you through it.
So for you to be in that place at this time, you had to be in a pretty good place of faith already.
I grew up in the church. I know my Bible. I know God, I knew all the things, I knew all the facts, all the, I could check all the boxes, always wasn't, if the doors were open, we were there, that whole thing. Going through this divorce, honestly, is when my actual real relationship with God started. That was the first time that I had to rely on him for anything. Because I'm a pretty independent girl, and that was the first time I had thrown up my hands and said, I cannot do this. And everything has been different since then. Before all of this, it was very, I do this thing with God. I go to church. I read my Bible because that's what I'm supposed to do because I'm a Christian. It shifted then to this is what I have to do because I need him. I can't wake up tomorrow and function through this without him. So that's when my dependence on God started, and that just really is what deepened that relationship, which is still flawed and not perfect by any means. But, so I wouldn't say that my faith was that strong going into it, but it got that way pretty quick.
You knew where to turn, it sounded like.
Absolutely.
And you did.
Yes.
Sounds like you had no choice, right?
I had no choice, yeah.
Either that or be institutionalized.
Or fall apart completely, yeah.
Wow. So I would think that faith began to look different for you when you turned this corner, or you had this awakening to a more of a relationship with God rather than a things that I do as a Christian.
A lot of stuff shifted. Obviously it was a very difficult time. So the way I thought about a lot of things really changed. Like one example is a lot of my Christian friends, I'm making air quotes.
Yeah.
A lot of my Christian friends, their response to all of this was how are you getting through this? And I would tell them, God is literally carrying me through moment by moment. But B, the overarching response from my Christian friends was, don't worry, your kids are still young. You're pretty. God's going to send you a new husband. They'll never know that this ever happened. You'll get remarried. And for a hot minute, I believed that. I thought, okay, well, then this is not so bad. I just need God to go ahead and send that guy on. We'll, bandage this up and move forward. And, they were so young, they'll never remember any of this. And that's not the right thing to say. I've learned that's not the right thing to say. Yeah, because that's not what happened.
No, and I guess it could be a thing where they want to be able to comfort a friend and give them hope in something that's important in society's terms, right? But it's one of those things that, not that there's anything humorous about the situation at all, but God, I can just envision this. Really?
Yeah, really, guys? That's your response?
You think that's what I've got going on here?
Yeah.
It makes him a little smaller than I think he actually is.
In a tiny box.
Yeah.
Well, and that also emphasized for me that the vision that people, even Christ followers have is so small sometimes.
Yeah.
We forget how big God is and what he can do if you allow him to do, the things that he wants with your life. Like, we're here breathing because he has a purpose for us. And so you can either allow that purpose to happen, or you can just assume that, okay, well, I was supposed to get married and have kids, so I'll get married again. And, this is, and I'll continue to do the little life that everyone's expecting me to do.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like you're trusting. It sounds like I've got a plan. I've had a detour. I'm going to rely on God until he gets me back on my plan.
My plan. Yeah. Oh, and I've had plenty of plans.
Yeah.
And God thinks that's real funny. He loves it when I make a plan. Because his plans are
it's scary
always
not to have a
different.
plan.
His plans are always different than mine.
I know. Yeah, right? But it's scary not to have a plan. You kind of got to map things out. You got to be a responsible adult and mom and everything else. There's this line that has to happen, right, between my plans and your plans, and maybe I just trust. And trusting is easier said than done. And the crazy thing I find about trusting is you don't get to see what's on the other side. Right? That's what's scary. You don't know what the result is. You have to know that it's good.
I don't know if God gave me this picture. If I came up with it on my own, I'm not going to try to take credit for it. But, there's been a lot of loss in my life, I guess. Not really mine. I have been around people who have experienced a lot of loss. I myself had a foster child who passed away while he was in our care. And I remember when a friend of mine, her son, died unexpectedly. And they asked me, well, I volunteered to do a slideshow for the funeral. And one of the songs that I came upon was Stephen Curtis Chapman. I'm not exactly sure what the title is. It's God is God, or the gist of the song is God is God and I'm not, and I can only see a part of the picture that he's painting. And that's kind of what I spoke to them in that moment. And I think I used that song in the slideshow. And that's sort of what I've told myself and other people who've experienced loss, especially the loss of a child, is, you think, why? Like, why would you bring a child onto the earth, first of all, who's going to end up in foster care? Moreover, why would you bring a child into this earth who, is going to end up in foster care and die in foster care of an unfixable heart condition? Like, what was the point of that other than pain, But I just like to picture like a giant canvas, and then down in the corner, you can see a beautiful portrait emerging of something, but you can't see the whole thing, and that's what I try to remind myself of with the whole trust thing, is God knows where he's going with all this. He knows where he's going with my life. He knows where he's going with the lives of each of my kids. He's got a plan. Like I said, otherwise we wouldn't be breathing. So he knows where he's going with all these things. It's just our job to trust him, to drive our lives, to tell us where to go next and what to do next, and know that he's got plans for all that if we'll just listen and do what he says.
How did you get to that? How did you get to where you actually could do that? Was it in the divorce and in this amalgamation of circumstances that were so overwhelming that you reached a new level of understanding what trust really was?
You said it. I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
In that moment, you can't go through something like that. And I don't want to make it sound like I've been through the worst thing in the world, because I've got a friend who just recently lost her second daughter, twins that, have died within a year and a half of each other. I mean, people have gone through horrible, horrible things in life. But, when I look at those circumstances, I just think, I don't know how anybody could get through without faith, without trust in God. He's our creator. I think the divorce is what started that, because I had no other option other than to lean on him to get through.
So how long after the divorce did you decide that you were going to start considering adoption?
My plan was about, I guess it was when Aiden was probably about, maybe Ella was about 6. So it was probably about 6 years after my divorce. And I had, in that time, for a little while, volunteered for a nonprofit organization that doesn't exist anymore, but they advocated for the adoption of kids who were HIV positive. Because, a lot of people, especially in the United States, didn't realize that all these kids that were born HIV positive, functioned like normal children. They had to take meds twice a day. But anyway, and so eventually we expanded that to kids with all, different abilities, special needs, hearing loss, blindness, limb differences, cleft, anything that you can think of, because, there's a lot of kids domestically and internationally that need to be adopted, but a lot of them get overlooked because they have something, a condition or a illness or a difference of some sort. And so that really kind of opened my eyes to, I'd always thought about adopting. I always knew I would adopt. And like I said, until I went to Africa, I assumed it would be a cute little brown baby from Africa. That's not really how those things work, though. I discovered that you don't just get to go over there and pick one out and bring it home with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just kind of, it's like, okay, adoption is a great need. But then even beyond that is this group of kids who, in places in Eastern Europe, they literally just get tucked away until they die. It's awful. And countries like, or, places like all over Africa, sometimes they're considered to be demons, or they've, been cursed or whatever. So anyway, that experience just opened my eyes further to the need, beyond just kids that need to be adopted, but kids with special needs. And for whatever reason, God landed me on Down syndrome.
So you went on mission trip in that 6 years sometime to Africa and discovered sort of a new reality of this need for not just adoption, but special needs adoption. And that's where it hit you there?
It was after that. I mean, it was sort of there just because it was so different than what I had expected. We actually went on the trip. We went around to different orphanages all throughout Uganda and Kenya. And we took supplies and things, but I went into the trip thinking I'm going to want to adopt every single one of these kids because, they're going to need me so much. And that was not how I felt when we left. There was great poverty, but there was also so much joy there. So many of them, they love their country. Yes, they live way differently than we do, but they're well cared for. The kids that we saw, obviously there's plenty that are not that in that situation, but it was just a shift in my mind. I guess God just kind of showed me, hey, this is not exactly where I need you, and many people still do adopt from Africa or adopt internationally, and they should. Some of us are called to do that. Some of us are called to stay here, and that's just how he chose to use me.
You said that you always knew you would adopt. Is that something that was just baked into you?
No, that was from that moment when I realized I was getting a divorce. That's when I never planned it before that.
The moment that you realized you were getting a divorce is the moment that you realized that you would adopt?
Yep.
Is it because that you had in mind that you were going to have more children, or was it, what would cause you to think in that moment that adoption's for me?
That's what God said. He literally said, this wife thing may not have worked out. I made you to be a mom, and that hasn't changed. And I just knew that from that moment on, that adoption would be part of my story. I didn't know the details. I thought I knew the details.
Oh, the details of the next husband, plug and play the next husband, and then get...
Yeah, or I would adopt a kid from Africa, or I would adopt a child from China. I had various plans along the way, but that's when it started, in my kitchen, the day I realized I was going through a divorce while I was 7 months pregnant. It's very contradictory.
That's counterintuitive to what you would think.
Very counterintuitive,
It would be the opposite. You would think that a mom would say, yeah, we're looking to adopt, but now that this divorce happens, I guess that's off the table. But
it was never on the table before. That's just when God stamped it on my heart, and I knew it would happen someday.
In that night in the kitchen, or just in that time?
That moment in the kitchen.
What was that like? Was it just such an impression on you that...
It was, I think, this is going to sound funny because I know God doesn't do what we want him to do, but honestly, I think to an extent, he knew that I needed... I don't want to say a purpose because I already had a purpose. Obviously, I had a toddler. I had a daughter on the way. I think he knew that I needed something to look forward to look into the future and go, okay, this is going to be okay. And it seems to me like his logic would have said, this is probably a little much to put on her right in this moment. But I think he just knew that I needed to know that he still had a plan for me.
That was beyond what you were already in.
Beyond what I had planned. Yeah. I had planned the husband and the kids and the dog and the white picket fence. And that was it. That was my plan. I wanted to be a mom, and I had accomplished that. And now it was all falling apart. And I think he just knew that I needed him to say, it's not falling apart. And why it couldn't have been, you're still a mom to these 2 kids and that's enough, I don't know. But it was just his plan. And I'm not going to question it.
Yeah, but that had to have been a pretty... It clearly made a strong impression on you in the moment. It just was heavy on your heart. There wasn't some...
Like I say the words, it was stamped on my heart because that's how I felt. Like it felt like it was written... Yeah, just like a tattoo. It was like, you will adopt someday, period. It was on me, in me, and I knew it was going to happen. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I had never planned it before that. it just became a fact. It just became something that I knew would happen.
That's amazing. Well, so what caused you, what happened to you or for you that took that up even a notch further in looking for Down syndrome children?
Well, like I said, working with that nonprofit, I think it just opened my eyes. Specifically Down syndrome, my only answer for that is God said so. I mean, true story. And I could talk about this for 2 hours, but there was a series of events that took place. You know, he said Down syndrome, this is where I want you to go. And I said, okay. And so I made a plan because that's what I do. And my plan was to adopt a 3 or 4 year old, you know, because they're out of that window of the babies. Everybody wants the babies, the healthy baby. They're out of that window of baby, but, you know, still young, still would fall in the birth order of my current kids, which cracks me up now that I was worried about that. But so a 3-year-old, 4-year-old child with Down syndrome from China was my plan. And so it took some time to get my parents on board because we were all living in the same house, and I just didn't feel like it was fair. My bigs were both already on board. They were a hard yes, but getting my dad on board was a little bit more of a journey. But once we got, you know, all on the same page, then I went to the adoption agency and I said, here's what I want to do. And, you know, did the application. And it turns out that I am not rich enough to adopt from China. They have very strict rules in China as far as who can adopt. You can't be overweight. You have to have a certain amount of money. Anyway, so, you know, I was a little bit devastated because I thought, okay, I've been waiting 6 years to get this thing going. I thought I had this all figured out. God, you know, why are you messing with my plan right here at the beginning? I'm trying to do what you told me to do, you know? And so I think I had written a blog post saying, you know, we're going to adopt a child with Down syndrome. And so the word was out there. Well, I got contacted by a friend of mine that there was a baby actually in the northwest corner of Alabama, which happened to be the same city where my dad grew up. So my brother and I, we spent a lot of time there as kids. And there was a newborn who had Down syndrome who needed somewhere to go home from the hospital. Like DHR was going to take this baby. They had nowhere for him to go. Would I say yes? And I was like, okay, this was not what I had in mind. First of all, one of the things that I told God, the only thing, my only requirement of God in all this, I will adopt. I will follow what you say. It'll be Down syndrome. I'll do whatever you tell me. Do not give me a newborn. I can't do that again. As a single mom, it's just too much. Don't ask me to do that. Of course, it was a newborn. It turns out that that child actually ended up staying with his birth family, which was amazing. But then that further had opened my eyes to, okay, you know, I always assumed this was an international thing, but that made it clear to me that, okay, if a child comes into foster care in the United States, they're hard to find homes for, period. But if they have special needs, medical needs, whatever, it's even more impossible. So God and I discussed it, and I said, okay, still not the newborn. I don't want to do that. But if foster care is the way you want me to go, we'll do that. So I signed up to start the classes to become a licensed foster parent. So throughout that process, you know, I think it takes 10 or 12 weeks to go through all the classes. And there was another child during that time, 2 other children during that time that came on the radar that both had Down syndrome, that both needed places to go, you know, and each time I thought, okay, this is it. This is my one, this is my thing. And each time, so 3 total kids with Down syndrome that, you know, ended up not needing me, ended up going somewhere different or staying with their family. And that was a little bit of a confusing time because I really thought, you know, okay, you know, we've talked about this and I feel like you've explained to me what you want me to do. So why is it not panning out, you know? And at some point during the foster care classes, a friend told me about an organization called National Down Syndrome Adoption Network. Basically, it's a nonprofit, and all they do is connect birth families, you know, who have a child with Down syndrome that they don't feel that they can parent with adoptive families who want to parent that kid. And they have hundreds and hundreds of families on this registry, I mean, which is surprising to people. But And I thought, okay, well, this is kind of silly because no one's ever going to choose the single mom, the not whole family out of all these hundreds of profiles on here. But I felt like God was saying, do it. And I thought, it's free. It's not, costing me anything. Okay. If you say, do the profile, I'll do it. Before I even finished the foster classes, I got a call from Stephanie Thompson at National Down Syndrome Adoption Network. And she said, we have a mom and she wants you and Aiden and LMA to parent her child. And of course, this was a not yet born newborn baby.
Sitting here thinking about, a child hoping to find a home and be adopted, newborn, even so, they don't realize it at the time, but then it's like a role reversal. I mean, you were hoping, you're like, I'm never going to get.
Where's my kid? Yeah. Where's my kid that you told me to get? I'm trying to do what you said to do.
I'm in this long line. I'm never going to get a kid.
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird. Not because I was in a hurry, because I wasn't in a hurry, but these things just kept happening. They kept falling in my lap, and I kept thinking, have I missed something? Am I on the wrong path? And I think that happens a lot, and I know it happens a lot in adoption. People get discouraged because, they'll get matched with a child and then that will fall through, or I had a friend who got matched with a child who ended up passing away before they could even go get him. These things just... God always has a plan, and the end result, I feel like almost everyone can look back and go, okay, I see now why, those 3 kids that I thought you were asking me to go get, I see now why they weren't mine. And I see why JoJo was mine,
Yeah, I do. And I guess I'm just thinking of that situation and any other time that God is working in our lives, when we have our own ideas of how things should go, I wonder how much stuff we miss. Like you said, these things kind of kept happening. I feel like if we were really in tune to just listen and wake up every day and say, I'm not going to pre-decide anything, God. I'm just going to look for ways I'm supposed to follow you. I'm going to look for these things that seem to be falling into place, or areas where I'm like getting resistance, or I kind of lose my peace around this or whatever. And I think sometimes we just plow through a lot of that stuff because we have our own ideas of what we want or what the plan should be, even though the plan could be something very worthy and noble and following what we feel like are the teachings of Christ. Still be our plans, and us not pay attention to the things that God's actually doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you necessarily paid attention to those things. A lot of times it's like hindsight. You can see how they fell into place later. It's like, man, what would have happened if I'd have like paid attention to that stuff?
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
Was it like that?
I don't think it was stuff that I necessarily missed. That God was trying to show me that I didn't see. I think I was in a place where I was really almost looking too hard, maybe, I was almost desperate to do this thing that he had told me to do. And again, it gave me, it gave me that purpose that I needed at that time, not that my biological kids were not enough of a purpose, or my job or whatever else, but I had just always, hoped to get to a place where I could make a difference, I guess, for the kingdom. And I thought, okay, this is my thing. So let's make it happen. Let's do it. You told me what to do. Let's do it. So it can be frustrating when, you feel like you're trying to do what God's telling you to do and it's just not panning out. But, like you said, though, in hindsight, I realized he knew exactly what he was doing the whole time.
Well,
he wasn't making mistakes.
No. And my mother gave me this book, and I'm partially through it now. It's called Waiting on God, and it's all these places in Scripture. It talks about us waiting for God rather than necessarily us pressing to make things happen that you feel like God's called you to do. Mm-hmm. I understand those things. I really do. And so how did you? So JoJo was first, right?
JoJo was first.
And so how did you get JoJo?
So she called. She said, this mom wants you to parent her baby. I had a split second of thinking, no. I asked for no newborn. It was the only thing that I requested. Like, can I just get this one thing, But it was a split second because the kids were actually in the car with me. I had just picked them up in carpool line, and they were excited, and I knew it was what God was pushing us towards. So, oddly enough, this mom chose me because we looked alike. That was her entire criteria. We looked alike. She lived in Texas. This was in April, and JoJo was born in June. So I didn't have a home study done yet. I was just getting to the end of the foster care classes, and I wasn't expecting to adopt anyone. I was expecting to move into foster care. So I had to get in a hurry and got the home study done. And beginning of June, or not, middle of June, the big kids and I and my mom hopped on a plane and went to Texas and had a baby.
Wow.
A newborn.
You talk about your parents. You got a blog, and I've read a good bit of that, and their involvement seems to be pretty amazing in this for you. Is that where you're getting most of your support? Are there other sources of support, and maybe?
No, it's mostly them, and then my big kids as they've grown up. I would not have been able to do any of this without my parents. Like, people say, oh, you did all these things as a single mom, and that's true, but like, had I lived on my own, it would have been impossible. So I think God saw it as a call to me, something I would have done somehow or another had the situation with my parents and their support not been there. But as far as the foster care goes, I fostered almost entirely kids with special needs or medical needs, and I lived at Children's Hospital. I had one girl that had cancer that had to, somebody had to be with her 24/7. So it was a lot. I had a girl that had a heart transplant, and we had to be at clinic appointments at 6:30 in the morning. So, I've got 3, 4, 5 other kids at any given time at home that somebody else has got to deal with while I'm taking care of the sick one. So yeah, they were, I would have never been able to pull it off without them, for sure.
Yeah. So you had started, I guess, the training for the requirements for becoming a foster parent, the certification. I don't know if that's the right terminology.
It is.
And during that process is when JoJo came up.
Right.
And wham, bam, it seems like he's here.
All of a sudden, we're living in Texas for a month, and then we're home with a newborn.
Wow. And then, so when did you start fostering? Was it shortly after that?
No. We had a newborn. I don't know if I mentioned that that was not something I was looking for, but somehow ended up with. So, that was not easy. Yes, my parents were there and I had their support, but, I was the one up in the middle of the night doing all the things. So that first year was not super easy, but I guess about a year after we brought JoJo home, just about exactly a year, I just felt God again talking to me and saying, that foster care thing, like, let's go ahead and finish that up. Because I had finished all the classes. I just hadn't done the final, like you have to have a physical and a TB test and paperwork, just all the final touches of getting officially licensed as a foster parent. And God's pitch to me was, let's just go ahead and do this, get it all finalized, just in case there's a kid with Down syndrome that ever needs a foster home. It wasn't, I want more kids, so let's do this, or I even want to serve in foster care necessarily. It was just, what if there's a kid with Down syndrome, so let's button this up just in case, so you can be available just in case. And I said, okay, just in case. Okay. I got licensed on a Friday, and the following Monday, I got a call about Z.
You have 2 biological kids, have gone through a divorce, and have decided that you, and God has pressed on your heart that you're going to go through this whole process and looking at in China and Africa and all these places, and adopt a Down syndrome baby.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
You have to say a baby who has Down syndrome.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, don't. You're not offending me. I just love to educate people on this.
Yeah. Well, please do.
Like you wouldn't say my cancer mom. You would say my mom who has cancer.
With cancer. Okay.
You use the description. They're not like my dad says this all the time. It drives me crazy. He says Downs babies or whatever. We in the special needs community, it's called people first language. So you say, a child who has Down syndrome, my son who has Down syndrome, a baby who has Down syndrome.
That's important. I appreciate you sharing that with me, and hopefully others will learn from that too.
It takes some time to get used to it. It's like using the R word. I used to do it all the time, and now it's like being stabbed in the chest when I hear it. Yeah. But I mean, it's not anything against anybody who's, I like to educate people in a friendly way.
Well, when you get on the other side of it, like you are in it, like you are, you understand it's I would think a much more respectful and dignified representation of the situation than. Yeah.
This doesn't offend me. I just, when I see the opportunity, I like to.
Yeah. So I would think it's some part of you is going to be saying, okay, single mom.
I'm good.
Child
I think I've
with
done
Down
enough.
syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm going to finish this up just in case.
Just in case. Just in case.
Wow.
Yeah. So the social worker called me on a Monday morning, and she said, so we've got this child who has Down syndrome. And I thought, you are kidding me, right? You've got to be kidding me. I just got licensed the last business day, and today you're calling me. And she said, he's at UAB, in the their NICU, and he has some medical conditions. Do you want me to tell you about them? And I said, sure, tell me. And she started rattling off this list of, he's ventilator dependent. He's got a heart condition called tetralogy of flow, which, of course, a lot of this stuff she couldn't even pronounce. He has chronic lung problems. He's going to need open heart surgery, polysplenia. I had to Google that one. He had a trach. He had a G-tube. Like, he had to be monitored 24/7 for his oxygen saturation. All the things. He had all the things. And at the end of the list, she said, are you scared off yet? And I said, well, I mean, yes, but I'll meet him. I was like, can I just meet him? And she said, sure. So basically what happens with kids, and a lot of people don't know this, but when a kid comes into the foster care system, they reach out to the foster parents in their county, and say, here's this kid. Can anybody take him? And if they can't find a placement for a child, because of whatever, special needs, age, whatever it is, then they go to the surrounding counties. And then if they can't find anybody in the surrounding counties, they go statewide. And the statewide email is kind of like the last ditch effort to find a place for this kid. And that's where Z was. He was already 7 months old. They knew from the time he was born that he was going to eventually come into foster care. So even though I was brand new on the scene, I was his sort of last chance. And had I not said yes, I realized after the fact, he likely would have gone to a nursing home. And there's only one nursing home in the state of Alabama that's for kids, and they only hold 20 kids. So, any kids in Alabama beyond that 20 go to an adult nursing home where they usually die. So I agreed to go meet him.
And that was it.
I really, really, really wanted to go in there and say, I just can't handle this. Like I really wanted to. I wanted to say, I'm a single mom. I've got 2 kids. They're young. I've got a newborn who has Down syndrome. This is just probably too much for me. But God kept kind of nudging me going, this is what you said you were going to do. You said, I asked you to be available if a kid with Down syndrome came into the foster care system. And a kid with Down syndrome has come into the foster care system, so it was kind of like I said that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be available for this. So how can I say no?
Yeah, there's something else going on there that's more than just going back on your word or an agreement. To be in that situation, it feels like to me there is a level of Holy Spirit inside of one's heart that would have to say, there's no way in heck I'm leaving this kid here.
It is something beyond me. I can tell you that. Like, it was not me saying, oh, I can handle this, or yes, I can help this child. It was God saying, I need you to do this. And me saying, I'll give it my best shot. I'm going to need a lot of help, but I mean, I was in no way equipped to deal with him at all. Like, it still blows my mind that they sent that child home with me. So they arranged a meeting, and I went up to UAB. They had him in like a little booster seat, I guess, hooked up to every machine that you can imagine. And there was a social worker and a couple doctors in the room, and I just sat down on the floor and picked him up. And I still don't know what possessed me to do that because they all looked at me like I was out of my mind, because they all had to pitch in and help, like, move cords around and whatever so that I could get him into my lap. And I just knew he was mine. And I'll tell you this, people say like, oh, I don't think I could ever do foster care because I'd want to adopt all of them. In my experience, that is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
But with Z, I knew. Like, I knew from the moment I laid my eyes on him that he was my child. And I didn't know his social circumstances at the time. And out of 15 kids, he's the only one that I laid my eyes on and knew this is my child.
What causes people to be convicted to become foster parents?
The need is great. There's not a question about that. It is an uncomfortable thing to do. It is an uncomfortable and difficult, painful, hard, terrible thing to go through. I think what convicts people to do it is just, first you have to realize the need. And a lot of people live in sort of a bubble that they don't even know, really what foster care is, what the circumstances are. Once your eyes have been open to that, you can't unsee it. So I think what causes people to be convicted to jump in and actually do it is either they've watched someone else go through it, jump in and do it and seen their experience, or they've had some sort of experience with it themselves, whether when they were a kid or a friend, that came out of the foster care system. No sane person would just volunteer for it without some sort of conviction, in my opinion, because it is hard. It is very hard. It's one of the hardest things, maybe the hardest thing I've ever done. Caring for someone else's kid, when the majority of the time these kids have, in my case, not only special needs, medical needs, but lots of emotional and behavioral stuff. I mean, they come in with the baggage, and it's a lot, it's a lot. Just to teach a child that doesn't, in a lot of cases, they don't know how to be loved or how to be cared for, or they're afraid, or they have major issues. Like, a lot of them came from terrible circumstances and have, mind-blowing problems. Like, things that I wouldn't go into in detail, but you'd be shocked what, an 8-year-old little girl could have going on in her life, But once you realize the need, you just kind of can't. It's not for everyone. Let me say that. There are so many people. Our church has an amazing foster care program, and there are so many people who showed up at our doorstep with diapers. When I had 2, 3, 4, 5 kids in diapers, showed up with food. Prayed over us. We're there to babysit. So I think we're all called. I know we're all called as Christ followers to care for the orphan, and that, in my mind, includes kids in foster care. But we all do it in different ways. But I don't think anybody has an out on that command, So hopefully, if maybe someone will hear this and think, I've thought about doing this before. Maybe I should. And the number one thing that holds people back, like I said, is they think they'll get too attached. And I don't know how I would ever, have this sweet kid come into my house and ever let them go. I would want to adopt them all. I hear it all the time. I don't know about other foster parents, but in my experience, like I said, that is absolutely not true. Every kid that came into my home, we loved on for the time we had with them. But like, when they either went home or went to a different placement, it was always the right time. It was always the right thing. Like, we had done our part, and now they moved on.
I would think that the main thing would be fear of the disruption of your existing life, especially if you have your own kids.
It is an enormous disruption of your own life. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know how many people are signing up for that.
Not very many. I mean, there's not enough anywhere in the United States. I don't think there's a place that says, oh, we've got plenty of foster parents. Thanks. We're good. It's an ongoing, constant need. And people jump into it and then they get burned out, or people jump into it and they get a couple kids and end up adopting those kids. And so they never foster anybody else. I mean, there's lots of factors that go into it. But it is a very difficult, life disrupting, low, non-paying job.
Yeah, I would think. What needs to happen to get a family or someone from, I don't necessarily want my current situation disrupted, into considering beginning the steps of certification? Is it seeing something? Is it like stumbling upon a situation is like, I can't turn away from that. I have to do something about that?
For some people, I think that's the case. I mean, like for me with Z, like I really didn't know what I was getting into when I started the foster care journey. I was just doing what I thought God wanted me to, and I really never had any intention of doing foster care, of being a foster parent. My plan was to be available if a child with Down syndrome needed, a temporary or forever home. So being the, poster foster parent was never on my radar. I think some people just have a heart for it and the right space for it. But what I always tell people is if you even consider it, like if it's even ever crossed your mind, just talk to God about it, pray about it and say, should I take this first step? Even if the first step is just to pick up the phone and call DHR and say, when are your next classes? Or to call, CPS or wherever you live, or to call, a foster agency and say, what would I need to do to become a foster parent? Okay, you've done step 1. Now pray about it again. And if he tells you to do step 2, then do whatever the next step is. And if he tells you to do the classes, then do the classes. But, that doesn't obligate you to continue down that path. I hate to use a Frozen analogy, but do the next right thing. That's from the new Frozen movie, but I think I coined that phrase now. But just take one step. I mean, I think people get afraid because it's like my whole life is going to change all in one moment if I say yes to this. But I mean, and some people, their calling is to foster newborns that just need a temporary space for a week or two before they go on to be adopted, or teens, that need a place temporarily. I mean, it's different for everybody. Or, I know people who've gone through the classes and have said, I realize now this is not something I can physically do, but now I see the need in a different way, and I know how to support people who do it, who are called to physically do this. So I think it's different for everybody, but just, take one step.
I can't equate it. I've not done it. We haven't fostered, and we've not taken any of those steps. But when you describe that, it sounds like it is going to be this explosion of disruption right away, and it doesn't sound like that's actually how it is.
No.
I always explain this to people who are newly expectant. They have this deer in headlights. It's like, oh my gosh. It's like, hey, look, here's the thing. For the most part, give or take, you got 9 months. God prepares you. Mm-hmm. You're not having the baby tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You're having the baby in 9 months. So by the time the 9 months gets here, you've in your mind you're already a parent. So God gives us that sort of prep time to get us emotionally and mentally ready for becoming a parent. It sounds like it's a similar thing.
And then once you have a baby, he makes you forget all about it, or else nobody would ever have a second one.
Well, and I thought about that with you and your story here. It's like, okay, you had that, and then it's like, okay, well, now she's going to sign up for adoption and fostering.
Yeah. Well, and I also remind people that are even considering it, like you said, it's not an explosion of disruption that, appears at your doorstep the moment you even consider, moving forward with this. When you do become a foster parent, there's tons of paperwork you fill out, but part of it is, you can say, I'm only comfortable with kids under 2. I'm only comfortable with, school age kids. I'm only comfortable because, my wife and I work full time, or I'm only comfortable with teens, or whatever it is. And any call that you get, you can always say no, so I think people just, I don't know. It's like if I even think about this, I'm going to get roped in and they're never going to let me go, and they're going to start delivering kids whether I want them or not.
Yeah.
And that's just not how it actually works,
So you have 2 biological kids with all of this. How's it been for them?
Never easy. It has been a whirlwind. We just stopped fostering, I guess. This one right at 2 years ago. Or has it been 1 year? I'm not sure. But it hasn't been that long ago that we've stopped. And it's been hard on them for sure. There's been times when there's not enough of me to go around. But I think the overarching takeaway for them has been they've seen a different reality than they ever would have not having gone through this. I think they look at kids in their school differently. Because you never know who a foster kid is when you're in school, and now they know, okay, there are these kids. They really exist. Like, they're roaming around these halls and they're going through this stuff. So I think it's made them, I hope that the impact has been it's made them more empathetic. I hope it's made them, realize that there are plenty of kids out here there who have different needs, different circumstances than ours, and that they're pretty blessed. And I hope having 2 brothers that have special needs has shown them that all people need to be loved, whether they look different or they have a trach or a G-tube or whatever. It's not that big of a deal. And I don't know, just to have a better view of people in general.
Yeah, I would think it, and I would think that a lot of people, or some people probably, are hesitant because they want to be able to sort of create the perfect childhood for their kids.
That was one of my parents' main concern is, what is this going to do to your kids,
right,
your real kids? And friends said the same thing. And my answer at the time was naive because I hadn't done it, but my answer was the same. I would hope that it would make them more compassionate, more empathetic, more understanding of people who are different than them, more accepting. I would hope it would make them the kid who looks for the kid that's sitting alone at lunch and wants to invite them. I would hope it would make them better. Yes, it's going to take a lot of me away from them. But hopefully ultimately it will be a positive experience for them. And I think that is the case.
Do you guys ever have time where you talk about it?
Yeah. Mostly we talk about the specific kids that came in and out of our lives, and we talk about where they are now, or how hard it was when they were with us, or, those kind of things. But yeah, I would hope that would be their answer. I'm not positive. They're teenagers, so I'm not sure exactly.
You're not getting much out of them anyway.
I'm not exactly sure what they would say.
I guess so. I would think with all that's gone on for the last however many years in this very unordinary life that you guys have led, that God has had to have shown you, or shown his presence in times, or paved a way in times where you just felt like they're I don't know how we're going to do this. Have you had things like that happen?
I don't know how we did it. Like, I look on it now, and it was very recent that we just stopped doing it. And I really don't know how we pulled it off. Like, even with the help of my parents, I think back of, Z, when he was first pitched to me, it was, we're trying to wean him off the ventilator. Hopefully he'll come home just on trach collar, which people are not going to know what that means. But I was never supposed to bring home an entire ICU. Like, that wasn't part of my vision of all of this when I said yes. But that was the reality. My mom and I had to do 6 weeks of training at Children's to learn how to operate a ventilator in our house. We literally brought him, and our living room became an ICU for real. It was an actual medical unit right there in our house. Like, we had to, I couldn't, My bedroom was upstairs. I couldn't sleep upstairs anymore because I can't get a kid in a ventilator up and downstairs. So I had to move into my parents' room, which was on the main floor, and they had to build out a space downstairs. We had to change everything to just bring him out of the hospital, much less to, raise him and eventually get him off the ventilator and get him off of oxygen and get him to the place he is now. I mean, it's just, and I mean, there was literally one weekend where we had 8 kids, 8. And I just look back and think, how did I make sure everybody had on clothes in any given day? How did I get them all to school? How did I keep up with all these medical appointments and medications? I mean, I had, like I said, 2, 3, 4-ish kids on medication, all different medications at different times of the day. I mean, there were kids that I had to do infused medicine and get up in the middle of the night and change. I mean, it is just nuts. I mean, I had 2 kids on oxygen at one point. How do you go anywhere? I really don't know. It goes back to me right after my divorce while pregnant. God was just, I really just think he held me up and got me through it. I really do. It was like, okay, I've asked you to do this, and now I can see this is really hard. So I'm just going to, do this and this and send these people to support you in this way. And really that a lot of people did. I mean, people showed up out of nowhere to do things we needed. And it was amazing because you can't do this kind of thing by yourself, for sure. For sure. But, I look back now on the stories. I look back at where the kids are now that we had. And, I mean, the ones that I know about at least are all doing great. And, it's just, it's a great feeling for me and for my big kids to be able to look at all the circumstances that we've been through and go, okay, that was really tough, but we got through it together, and look at all the good that came out of it. Elon, for example, is the one that passed away. And when they called and asked me about him, they told me he is going to die before he turns 3. And I told that to my big kids. The 3 of us made every decision ourselves as a family before we, pitched anything to my parents. And they were not so stoked about that one. It took some prayer and some time to get a yes out of them because they knew how hard it was going to be. And there was part of me that honestly thought I could fix him. I thought, okay, well, they think he's not going to make it, but once he has me to take care of him, I know everybody at Children's, and surely we can figure out a way. No, he ended up passing away, and it was the hardest thing ever. But his parents, made a commitment to him in his last days that they were going to get their family back together, and they did. And, they're all back together now. They're doing great. It's just so many things that we can look back on that were positive, that in the moment, was just like, how did we even do all of these things? I'm not sure, but it was definitely where we were meant to be. And I think a lot of good came from it.
From that moment that you had this feeling 7 months pregnant in the kitchen to now, how have you changed?
Oh, man. How have I not changed? How have I not changed? I mean, I've just learned to depend on God in a way that I never knew was a thing. Growing up, it was just what we did. It was just what you do. It's just what you do. You go to church. You have a Bible. You go to Christian camp in the summer. It was just the things that you did. It wasn't who you were. It wasn't my identity. And from divorce on, that just changed. I realized, I guess, the bigger picture of who God really is and all the need that's in the world. I think it's changed me in a way that I realized through mission trips and foster care and adoption that this is a really broken place, and I'm glad it's not our home. But I also think we all have a purpose, and I think so many Christ followers don't necessarily look at their Christ followerness as something they should be doing. It's just something they are, But those, my thoughts are those commandments, like those things that God told us in the Bible to do, he really meant for us to actually do them. Not just go to church on a Sunday and pray about doing them or pray about other people doing them or pray for missionaries, but go, therefore. Not maybe go, or if you can go, it's just go. go, do, go therefore and make disciples. That's our job. And it's something that requires action, that's different than just showing up on a Sunday morning in a cute outfit.
Do you ever think you missed out on stuff because of it?
Before all this?
Since?
Oh, on life stuff. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I know I have. I mean, a ton of stuff. I've lost friends because of foster care, close friends, just because it got to be too much. I had a friend actually say to me, like, it's hard for me to be around you because you make me realize all the things that I'm not doing. But I mean, aside from that, just regular things. Yeah. I mean, one of my dad's main concerns in going into all this was, how is this going to affect your chances of ever finding another husband?
I'm sure.
And he said those words to me, and he was right. That hasn't happened, but I wouldn't change any of it. I mean, I love my life. I love my kids. I love all the junk we've been through. It's not pretty, but it's our story, and I wouldn't change it for anything.
What do you think you've learned? Have you made sort of spiritual discoveries through this process? I mean, have you learned about the nature of God in ways that you wouldn't have otherwise?
Right after Ella was born, you have that 8-week window when the doctor sort of recommends that you don't take the newborn anywhere, and it was flu season, in March. Nothing like what we're dealing with now and pandemic, but, so I had started moonlighting, in the evenings at Brook Hills, which is a local church here in Birmingham. And David Platt was the pastor there at the time. And so, I would stay home with her Sunday mornings while my parents and Aiden went to church, and then I would go Sunday nights. And, that's just a funny little, another funny little thing that God kind of did in that time to change me drastically, because I heard things that were so different than I had ever heard, coming from a pulpit before. This is before Radical came out, but that was a lot of what was talked about at that church was, getting the gospel to the people who have never heard it, and that was really something we never talked about in my church growing up, or in the churches I was in the early days. Like it just was something that was never mentioned. I mean, we talked about, you need to be telling your neighbors, and you need to be telling the people that you work with about God, and you need to invite them to church. That was always the thing. It wasn't my job to tell anybody the gospel. It was my job to invite people to church. And so really just accidentally falling upon, well, that's not an accident, obviously, but it was all just part of God molding me and changing me in that time. And that really opened my eyes to, like I said, all those commands in the Bible, he really meant for us to do those things. And I grew up not really realizing that. And I know that sounds silly because it seems so obvious, but I think so many churches nowadays don't really call people out to, hey, look, we're supposed to be doing this. Like, who is taking care of the widow? Who's taking care of the orphan? Who's going to do foster care? Who's going to go, midterm, long-term overseas to these places that have never heard the name of Jesus? Like, what are we going to do about all this? It's not just show up every Sunday and get your ticket punched so that you can get to heaven someday. It's, we collectively as Christ followers have jobs to do. There's things that we should be doing. If you're here and you have breath in your lungs, you have a purpose for the kingdom. So what is it? And it's not going to church once a week. That's not your purpose. It's way beyond that. It's way beyond the reaches of what's comfortable and what's normal. And it looks different for everybody. For some people, it looks the same. There's lots of people that I know that do foster care. There's also lots of people that I know that took their whole families and moved to the Middle East for 2 years, and started businesses, and, people that live in Southeast Asia that teach English to college students, and by that avenue are taking the gospel to them. It's just, I guess the major lesson is our faith needs to have legs. It needs to have action. Otherwise it's just sort of self-serving, I guess. And it doesn't have to be moving to the Middle East. It doesn't have to be disrupting your life to do foster care. It can be supporting someone who is a foster parent. That can be just as huge for the kingdom. It doesn't have to be something monumental, I guess is what I'm saying. It's just, I realized for me that if I was going to throw my yes into the ring with God, I had to be ready for whatever he was going to toss back at me, and I that's the avenue that I chose to agree to and to trust him through. But I think that's the big picture lesson for me, is contrary to how I was raised to believe, I now see, that yes, God is good. He's loving. Like if you put your trust in him, he will carry you through the worst situations. But he's also a jealous God, and in that he's jealous for his glory. Like that's the purpose of us even being here, is to glorify him and to bring glory to him. And it just opened my eyes to, what am I doing with my life that is fulfilling that purpose?
And this was it, foster care and adoption.
And it continues to be it, because, now that we're not actively fostering anymore because I just can't do it. But raising JoJo and Z, JoJo is a hot mess of a kid. He is a handful and a half. And, now that's my purpose. That's my calling. And I think, well, and obviously Z too, and my other kids, but they don't require nearly as much prayer and patience as he does. But, I think often, like, what would have happened if he would have stayed with his biological mother? I mean, I can't imagine where he would be. So, yeah, I mean, nothing has changed in that when all this started, all I wanted to be was a mom, and God said that hasn't changed, and everything has changed. I mean, I'm still a mom. This is still what I always wanted to do, what I'm doing. It looks way different than I ever would have imagined. But also just the way that I see life, the way I see the world. I think when people show up at your funeral, what are they going to say about you? Was it like, he was a good person to work with, or, she was nice, or she always was there on Sunday morning? I think about that kind of stuff now.
There was someone that, and it happens in lots of cases, someone recently that passed away, and I heard repeatedly, well, he was a good man. He worked hard. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's good. But man, I hope that's not what they say about me.
Yeah.
Not that I don't want to be a good man and work hard. And those are things that are good.
Yeah.
But I feel like personally for me, I will have not answered the call.
Yeah.
If that's all somebody says about me. And it sounds like that's the conviction that you carry in making decisions on whether or not you're going to adopt. And heck,
I mean, in a more human way, it's like, you got me through this thing that I could not have gotten through without him holding me up, literally. So how can I then turn around and say, no, I'm not going to help you with this thing you're asking me to do? It's like that experiencing God study. I don't know if you've ever done that, but God is working. He's doing the work. It's going to get accomplished. Like the Bible tells us that. So it's our choice whether or not we're going to join him and get involved in that work, or are we just going to hang out and watch him do his thing? He doesn't need us to accomplish his mission. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we can choose to get involved and be part of that. And as a parent, I know that that's one of the things that I'm going to answer for when I meet him face to face, is, how did you do with raising these kids? And that's important to me. And this all goes into that. Like, I'm not trying to show off for anybody. I'm not even trying to show off for God. I'm trying to give my kids a good example of, what does a Christ follower do? Do we just go to church on Sunday and that's it? Pray maybe before we eat? Or does it look different than that? And for me, I hope it looks different than that. And for them, when they become adults, I hope it looks different than that. I hope their faith has legs and not just something that they do because that's what we do.
That is a powerful message. It's action. It is legs to your walk. And, well, it's the challenge of it too. I mean, it's a challenge. It is you've got a comfortable thing going on where you are. And Christ's existence on this earth was anything but comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It was constant discomfort. And I think it was that way for the apostles following him and for Paul and down the ages.
You will have trouble. I mean, the Bible says that if you follow me, you will have trouble. Not you might, or it might be hard.
And there would be struggle too, but we get attached to the comfort
mm-hmm.
of the life that we have. And following him, I believe, rarely is comfortable.
I agree.
I think we all have to be less afraid of the discomfort.
Well, because it is uncomfortable, it does take you outside of that zone of what you think your life is supposed to look like. I don't know who gives us the idea of what we think our life is supposed to look like, but I mean, it's great though. You know, it's awful and uncomfortable and hard and scary, but so fulfilling. You know, being in that spot where you can go, I am exactly where God wants me to be. Like, this is hard. I've got an ICU in my living room, but if you walk up to me and say, are you doing what God's telling you to do right now? You know, you can go, yes. This is, I'm not even going to have to think about it. Am I the perfect Christian? By no means. Do I read my Bible every day? Do I take, X amount of time to pray every day? No. I am flawed and messed up. But has God asked me to do something, and am I doing it to the best of my ability and the best of my knowledge? Yes. And that is such a wonderful feeling.
I had a guy on the podcast early on, and he made the statement, said, and I'll miss it, but I'll get it close. He said, there's no greater feeling that you can have on this earth than knowing that when you lay your head down at night, you've done exactly what God put you on this earth to do.
Yeah. It's that whole difference that people talk about, the difference in happiness and joy,
Yeah.
Happiness is based on your circumstances. I'm happy because I have, a great huge house and it's so beautiful and I have a great job and so much money in the bank. Joy is not contingent on your circumstances. Joy comes from the Lord. He gives it to you. And I guess people that that have never felt that can't really understand, that comfort and feeling that comes from knowing you're doing the right thing, like knowing that you're where God wants you to be. Are you perfect? No. Far
is it
from
easy?
it.
No.
Is it easy? No. It is not easy, but it's always good. That's what I always say. I mean, it's hard, definitely.
I recognize that more now for myself as a feeling of fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an inner fulfillment. It's not like a win. It's not like you've accomplished something like a certain number on your net worth or something like that. It's not like that, but it's a fulfillment kind of in your core, even when things aren't.
And so many stories in the Bible are that way, like you think about, like things that, in being in prison and singing praises to the Lord because you just, you're where you're supposed to be. Is it a terrible place? Is it a great place? Is it hard? Yes, it's hard, but you're doing what you're called to do,
You mentioned a second ago that you're like not perfect and you don't get up and read scripture and pray an hour every day or whatever, which I find interesting. And maybe that for you to do what you're doing, I would think you got to get fed somehow.
So for me, this is going to sound silly, but a lot of it is from music. I just have a couple of my, Jesus playlists. I have the one that I play when I feel like I'm not good enough, and I have the one that I play when, I really need to be reminded of who I am and those kind of things. And that's where a lot of it comes from, because living in a house with 4 kids and 1 adult, I don't have a whole lot of what people call quiet time.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the concept, but it doesn't really exist in my life. And when things do get quiet, I'm too exhausted to use any brain cells to actually try to think of anything. But for me, it comes a lot from music and a lot from prayer. I realized a long time ago that, I used to feel like I wasn't doing it right because, you hear all these people that have their prayer closet and they go to it for a certain amount of time a day. And I'm all for these people. I'm clapping and cheering them on, because that's great. I wish that I had that. Somebody would be banging on my prayer closet. Like I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. So like locking myself in a prayer closet for 10 minutes is just not going to happen. But at some point I got over the idea that you have to have that dedicated time of when you sit in a dark, quiet place and talk to God. I just do it all the time now. If I'm driving, I'm just not in a formal way, not out loud. Like I'm just kind of always constantly saying, for example, when my kids are in school, God, just please, help Aiden to pay attention today to the kids around him who might need a friend. There you go. Like I'm not, again, I'm not doing something that's super holy and, having this great, long, drawn out conversation with God. But I just do what I can, I guess. Another thing that I really do like, and I'm not always good at this either, but is the chronological Bible. I did that a few years ago, pre-adoption. And it really did open my eyes to a lot of what, like the story of the Bible, when you just do it start to finish. Growing up in the church, I knew all this, I knew Jonah, I knew David, I knew all the stories, but like how it all fits together in the big picture is pretty life-changing. And this year I thought I would do it again. And then I thought there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to, by the time my head hits the pillow at night, I'm out. Like there's no way I'm going to be able to read my Bible for 10 or 15 minutes. And again, I finally readjusted my thought to go, okay, wait, who said it has to be before you go to bed at night that you read your Bible? So I found an audio version of the chronological Bible, and I've just been listening to it as I have time. I just turn it on. I don't do it every day, but I'll get through it in the year. So I think for me, a lot of it is just realizing that I am imperfect. I am so flawed, but, I still do have to be fed. I have to have that encouragement or I will get off track, and finding creative ways to find time to do that. It doesn't have to fit in the box of how everybody else does it. It doesn't have to look how everybody else does it. And it certainly doesn't have to be perfect, but, I do my best. I fail every day, but.
It's so clear that following what God is asking you to do is just the priority.
I hope so.
I hope I don't know how you do what you do unless it is.
Yeah.
Why would you make these decisions unless you are just trying to follow
or very unstable? One of the two. Yeah, I really am. I really am trying. I just also don't ever want to come across as that person who like, I'm such a good Christian that I'm doing all of these things, and it's so easy and, God is just so proud of me and whatever. I am a hot mess. Like ask either of my teenagers if I'm a hot mess. Hot mess. Am I trying to make a difference for the kingdom the best way I know how? Absolutely. Is my number one priority in life raising those people to be decent humans who, go on to contribute to the kingdom? Absolutely. Everything else is kind of like, optional. If I can hit those, then I think I'm doing great. Even if I am still a big mess.
So what would your message be based on all the things, your experiences, the decisions you've made, your interactions with God? What's Jenny's message?
Yeah. My message would be get a Bible and get your message from that. But if you didn't have one and you had to listen to me, I would just say, trust God. No matter what you're going through, no matter how flawed you are, no matter how un-Christ follower or un-Christian you are, if you say to God, I need your help and I'm going to trust you to help me. Not just, can you fix this for me? I need some money, but really mean it, really believe it, really say, God, I can't get through XYZ without you. I need you to help me through this. Whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to trust you and I'm going to do it because I can't get through this on my own. He will. You're going to have to remind yourself of it every day, maybe every hour for a while until you get used to it. But he will help you through whatever it is you're going through. As flawed as you are, as flawed as I am, he is love. Like he created us because he loves us. And he will help you. And then the other thing is, whatever he tells you to do, it's not always going to be easy. It's actually probably going to be really hard, but that doesn't mean it's not good. That doesn't mean you can't look back on it and go, wow, that was some tough stuff that we went through, but look what God has done. Like, look how he has used that to bring us to wherever it is. And it's not necessarily going to be a place where you realize you never need any money anymore because you're a millionaire, or you have reached some sort of social status. I don't know. For me, it's just, number one, trusting him and knowing that his plans are always better than mine. And I'm good at coming up with some plans, but his plans are always better than mine. He knows the picture he's painting with your life, with your kids' lives, with everybody, every person on this planet. He knows the hairs on your head, the days that you'll be on this earth, and he knows what your purpose is. So let him use you. He's going to do the work. He wants you to be involved in the work. But he can accomplish it without you, but your life will be so much better, so much more fulfilled. You'll have true joy if you get in there and get involved. That's the reason that you're on this earth.
It's like get in the game.
Get in the game. The game's going to be hard. You're going to have to work at it. It doesn't come naturally for a lot of us, but it's where it's at, it's where the real joy and contentment is. So many people just, I think part of the way that I was raised, not in the church, but just in my family, was to be okay with what you've got. They say the well-kept secret of contentment is want what you already have, and I learned that growing up. And I think that's important because in this society and day and age, everybody, I've got to work more hours so that I can afford a boat, or I've got to do this so that I can get a new car. That's just not where any of the good stuff is, like the stuff and the things and it's the experiences and the time and the ways you can serve and, raising decent people. I mean, these are the things that make you lay your head down at night, like your friend said, and go, I'm right where God wants me to be,
I know you don't share this so that everybody can pat you on the back. It's very clear and very evident. And, but your life does kind of shine a light on that stuff for people.
I hope so.
And I know people who, have a lot of woe is me with a pretty comfortable life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Comparatively
and see,
speaking.
and that's just not, I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but just like you said, there's so many people that live such comfortable lives, but they want for so many things that are just not going to fill those spaces.
Yeah, the fulfillment's not there in it. And we all have to be willing to get in uncomfortable places to find the fulfillment.
And I really think it comes from serving others, whatever
Absolutely.
that looks like, whether it's others in your home or outside of your home or overseas. I just don't think you can get that without that service aspect somewhere in your life.
Yeah, the commandments summed up are love God and love neighbor, and none of that's about you.
Yep, love God and love the people he made.
That's right. And so it's in the outward direction,
mm-hmm.
not in the inward direction.
Yep.
That's what you're doing. I'm really honored to be able to meet you and to have the time and the blessing. Like I say this in all these interviews, the blessing is mine. To get a chance to sit across the table from somebody who didn't take the comfortable route.
Yeah. Well, and I also tell people the reason I'm willing to do this kind of thing whenever the opportunity arises is I know that God doesn't waste pain. Like I didn't go through this mess and then, do all these things for myself or for, just me and my kids to learn the lessons. Like I think he uses our stories and he uses the pain that we've been through to really affect others. Like I lost a child that was, he wasn't mine, but he was mine. And because of that pain, I have been able to minister to so many friends who have lost children. And I think that's just the big picture of kind of how God works in our lives is we go through things so that fill in the blank, so that I went through a divorce so that fill in the blank. It can be a million different blanks, and that's the reason why I'm always willing to share my story and write about things and tell people, because I think those are the things that cause people to change.
If our faith doesn't cause us to act, to serve, to produce fruit for the kingdom, to get in the game, what faith do we really have? I can't think of a single instance in Scripture where someone had a spiritual encounter or transformation that wasn't immediately sent on mission for the kingdom of God. Jesus told us to follow Him, not admire, watch, or even worship Him. Following indicates activity, movement, participation. It does not indicate mere observation, study, or admiration. Jenny Clark has clearly sacrificed her deepest personal ambitions to follow God's call in her life. For her, it looks like adoption and fostering in some of the most inconvenient and uncomfortable conditions, to say the least. I'm not sure how any of us can look at her life, then find any excuse as to why we're not actively serving God. I think Jenny would encourage us all to hold each other accountable for keeping God's commandments to take care of the poor, the orphan, the prisoner, and anyone else who has need. And not because it's what we're supposed to do, but because it's where true fulfillment is hidden. Jesus said, "When you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me." I think He's clearly telling us that we will encounter Him there, because that's where He is. So the question begs, where do we feel the tug to do something with our faith? What needs doing? What breaks our hearts? What makes us feel guilty for looking in the other direction, hoping somebody else is going to fix it? Make no mistake, God is calling each of us to some kind of mission. It may be time to consider moving toward discomfort rather than avoiding it so intensely. I hope Jenny's story compels each of us to become more open to our call and to act on our faith. Thank you for being with us today on A Stronger Faith. You know, sharing our faith and our experiences is one of the best things we can do to make disciples of others, just like Jesus commanded us to do. That's what Jenny did today. This podcast was created to provide just such a platform for people like you to share and thus participate in advancing the kingdom of God. If you feel like your experiences could affect others toward Christ, and you might be willing to share, reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, our website, or via email at connect@astrongerfaith.com. Also, we need your ratings and reviews on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, and other podcast players so these stories can reach more people. Please take a moment to leave a rating or review if you haven't already. And until next time, I pray for peace and a stronger faith for you and those you love.